Now, I guess Sherry, is this for you? The question slide?
Yes. Yes, I have several questions that were emailed in. We had some great ones in. To begin with, Vanessa asked, how does a community association locate a qualified vendor to inspect playground equipment?
Yeah, and we did touch on this a little bit. Kelly, you had asked, there is the Certified Playground Safety Inspector Program through the National Playground or the National Recreation and Park Association. And there are lists of CPSI certified folks in your state through that website.
Cheryl asks, or Mark asked, how often do you need to inspect playground equipment?
Yes, and I touched on that a little bit in the presentation. I think it's most important to set an inspection program that works for your playground and your staff and takes into consideration all of those things that I was talking about, the use of your playground, the weather and the elements, whether you have pests that deteriorate your playground structures. Really, it's going to be unique to each of your playground sets, and the important part is to have an inspection process and a maintenance process in place.
Donna asked, what is our liability if someone gets hurt on a playground that hasn't had a maintenance check?
Well, again, the lack of inspection is one possible indicator of a failure of care. Now, then we get into fact issues, but it's certainly possible that an injury, even with reasonable inspections, might not have been discovered. But I would certainly rather an association be in a position where it can show that it has typically a vendor, somebody qualified to inspect the equipment on a regular basis. And if they miss it, well, there's two possibilities. It may have been so hard to catch that nobody really is at fault, or it may be the inspector's problem.
Cheryl asked, what kind of mulch should be used for a tot lot, and how often should it be replaced?
That's a great question. When you're considering surfacing, it's really important to check with the U.S. Consumer Safety Commission's Public Safety Handbook. There are standards around this. They have very simple calculations that help you understand the best surfacing. And for instance, if you are using loose fill in a tot lot, what depth it should be at in order to decrease the chance of serious injury. So the CPSC and the ASTM standards, make sure to check those before you install surfacing on your playground.
Mike asks, what steps should a vendor who regularly observes playground equipment but is expressly not performing a safety inspection take or avoid when an obvious hazard is observed?
Well, I would say that anybody, a board member, a manager, a vendor who may not be a playground inspector, when we see an obvious hazard, we have a legal and moral responsibility to report it immediately. And if I am a vendor and I'm worried about somebody getting injured, I'm also probably going to follow it up with an email or fax documenting that, hey, I just called you, I just alerted you to this, you need to do something right now.
Another question from Donna. Are HOA playgrounds considered public playgrounds even though we are members with guests-only private HOA?
Boy, what a great question. Now, my license is only in California. Some of my other attorneys in the firm have different states. But I can tell you that in California, playgrounds are considered by the Health and Safety Code as public, even though it's a completely gated security community, as are swimming pools. They are considered public for the purpose of the application of California's playground safety law. So the fact that you're a gated community or even a security building does not mean that you don't have to pay attention to state laws and regulations. And I would strongly suggest that in your state's jurisdictions, wherever you're listening from today, check with your counsel and make sure that you know if these standards apply.
Mm-hmm. Also another question, do we need to create a maintenance plan for all playground equipment?
I'll take that one, Kelly. The short answer is yes. All equipment should be inspected and maintained regularly. We obviously first recommend that you check those manufacturers' guidelines for the specific pieces of equipment. But as I mentioned in the webinar earlier, there's all kinds of other things that can impact how often you inspect, things like the weather, things like pests, and all those types of things. And you want to take all those things into consideration when creating your maintenance plan and make sure that it's unique and feasible for your playground in setting a best practice for you.
And our final question is, what do we need to know before adding a new play structure or element to existing play areas?
Yeah, and I'll take that one. I can't overstate the importance of knowing the CPSC guidelines, the ASTM standards, and referencing that material from your manufacturers and your installers. Always go back to that to start understanding what is needed for your play areas.
And in my state in California, you're going to have one of those inspections to start off under the Health and Safety Code. Well, as we wrap up, one of the things that Sally and I wanted to emphasize is that in dealing with this issue, we really have to have a paradigm shift in how we think about play equipment. You know, we managers and HOA attorneys spend a lot of time dealing with maintenance and failure of balconies and roofs and balcony railings and plumbing and things typically that deal with water. But most of those are more passive deterioration issues. Here with play equipment, we're dealing with actively abused items that are designed to take abuse, that are designed to be pulled and pushed and swung and jumped on. And it's amazing to me that we don't spend actually a greater amount of time than we do. And I will tell you, I have to confess that this has woken me up as well. This disaster in Las Vegas and this terrible thing that happened to this young man made me realize that I also need to be putting much greater emphasis on these equipment items that are abused by their design. They're designed to be attacked, and that we have to be much more careful with them to take care of them, because it's these little ones in the slide that we're trying to protect at the end of the day. It's not just a financial issue. There are people affected, and these particular people, and since Sally and I created the seminar, we'd like you to meet Jack Richardson on the left and Little Harbor Wood in the middle. Those are my two grandsons. And on the right, Sally, do you know those two?
Yeah, Violet and Desmond Wheeler.
That's what it's all about, folks, is taking care of each other and taking care of our little treasures, whether they're our kids or our grandkids or somebody else's kids or grandkids. We just have to think a little bit more deeply on this issue and spend a little bit more time and, yes, spend a little bit more money to take care of these folks. And at the end of the day, everybody's better off.
And with that, we must conclude today's excellent online seminar with thanks to our webinar sponsor, LiftMaster. Registration for this live webinar also entitles you to the recorded archive after the webinar is finished. Please note that the recorded archive will be available within 48 hours of today's event. Simply return to the same login page and launch to view the recording over the next 120 days. Please note there are no continuing education credits for free webinars. A special thank you to our speakers, Sally Pelto-Wheeler and Kelly Richardson. Thank you for your participation in today's webinar. We hope to see you here again soon. Today's program is copyright 2018 by Community Associations Institutes with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. You may disconnect now. Thank you.